Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. If you're a franchise, independent, or buy here, pay here car dealer, you're going to absolutely love this podcast or this video blog that we're doing today. And we're talking about hiring and retaining talent and building a superstar team. And my name is Justin Osburn. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm an independent retail car dealer 20 group executive moderator and a dealer consultant with NIADA. And today I have one of the top experts in the industry on building and retaining the right team, Adam Walker. Adam is a consultant and licensee with Cultural Index and specializes in assisting companies to hire the right person for the right job using personality data. And yes, he does service car dealers. And Adam, thanks for joining me. It's a true privilege to have you on here. I know we've done some work together in the past, and I've always just been blown away about what you do. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about you and your company?
Yeah, well, first, Justin, thanks for having me on today. It's an honor and privilege. I hope somebody can find some benefit and help from what we're going to discuss today, because it is one of the leading issues with anybody that's running a business, but specifically in the automotive industry. Man, people are tough, and I get to wake up every day. I don't look at what I do as a job or a career. It's a calling, because every day I wake up and I get to save lives and help people get in the right roles to be successful and live happy, fulfilled lives. And anytime you can take somebody that maybe came in as a porter and turn them into an F&I guru, and they go from making $10 an hour to 150 grand a year because they were overlooked talent, man, that's an awesome responsibility that I get to come to work with and do every day.
Well, that's great.
So thanks for having me on, and I look forward to having this dialogue.
Well, it's going to be an interesting dialogue, and just to kind of set the stage for our listeners, Adam, you know better than anyone that car dealers are notorious for turnover. It's everywhere we look. It seems like it's always been that way. And it's not just in sales, but we see turnover in the BDC. We see it at the manager level. And a big trend right now is retaining excellent talent and technicians in the shop, which can be a tricky hire. And tell us your overall perception of the challenge that car dealers have struggled with in the past, and why they have such a hard time kind of figuring out this hiring process, and not only to hire the right people, but to retain them.
Right. So it's really two, maybe threefold. Number one, they trust their gut. At best, their gut's going to be 55, 60% accurate. When you have behavioral instruments that have accuracy ratings of 94, 98%, you don't run your accounting department based on gut feel. Why would you, interact with the lives of people and all the people that are downline from them and their family and their friends, and put them in a position to fail, right? So, most of the time what I see is managers and owners look through their own personal lens, and, somebody walks in their office, and, right? So, most of the time what I see is managers and owners look through their own personal lens, and, somebody walks in their office, and just because they walk and they talk, that doesn't mean we all think the same. And so we make the assumption that, I'm going to bring somebody on board, and they want to come on board, and they're going to do the job and have ownership mentality, when the real fact of the matter is only about 30% of your workforce is engaged, and the other 30% have ownership mentality. So you're talking about a very small group of people that think like you would if you were actually running the dealership. And so from a selection standpoint, they trust their gut, and more times than not they fail and they have turnover. And so that's one portion of the equation. The other portion is they don't interview properly, right? You come in, you go through that process, but you don't really dig deep. You don't ask the questions. You don't find out who that person is and what their worldview is. And I know that sounds like it takes a lot of time, but there's ways to do that and cut to the quick and be very effective about it. So part of what dealers struggle with, the third portion of that equation is if the dealership gets bigger, they start to remove themselves from the hiring process. And anytime an owner removes themselves from the hiring process, what you can pretty much bet the ranch on is the people underneath of them aren't going to hire people that are stronger than they are. The only person that's going to hire people stronger than they are more times than not is going to be the person that signs the checks, because at some point they want things to be self-sufficient and run and grow and prosper. And while we all want that, if you have a service manager that's looking out for his job, the chances of him finding somebody to replace him a year down the road or 2 years down the road just doesn't happen. So when the ownership removes themselves from the onboarding process, that causes a real problem in dealerships.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have heard the saying that you always want to hire your replacement. And I know that can be scary for a lot of people. So, okay, so we know that we have a great room for improvement, especially in the dealership world and on the lot. So what is it? Tell us exactly what you do that helps in hiring the right person, and then from there to retain that person.
Right. So what I do every day is a program. And while there's a behavioral instrument tied to that, when you have an opportunity to look at, truly who that person is, how their brain is wired, what they're going to, and know what they're going to be great at and what they're not, you put people in positions to work from their strengths instead of their weaknesses, right? So that's the first portion of the equation. But you can bring the best talent on the team as you want, but if it's led, by a group of people that doesn't have the horsepower, to lead and manage that grade A talent, before long, that talent's going to leave. So, people are complicated machines, and, reading a one-page printout or a report or sitting through a one-day seminar on people, organizations spend millions of dollars a year training people to run machines, go through sales training, you name it. There's a way to train for it. But what organizations spend very little dollars on is teaching people how to communicate with each other, understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses, and knowing how to connect and get more out of that talent. So, part of the gift that I get to deliver is the ability to help people, gain some clarity, some enlightenment, some understanding about our differences. Most of the time when people have conflict or strife inside a workplace, it's not because they hate each other. It's because they're coming from two different sides of the spectrum and they don't understand how to communicate. So if you look at like front of the house versus back of the house, typically those are two different groups of people. So, sales versus, the techs, right? Or even, your service writers versus your techs. Service writers typically is a sales type of a position. Techs, they're working with inanimate objects and wanting to fix, things that don't talk back. Those two people are in constant conflict. So when they don't understand how to communicate, and you get the wrong type of people in the wrong roles, you can have some real chaos in the back of your house. Same thing with your finance people versus your sales people on the floor, or your controllers, right? Those are different types of people. And so, part of being able to figure that out is, helping people understand our differences and not pit them against each other, but celebrate them, right? Appreciate the fact that this person's good at what you're not, and it frees you up to do more of what you do. So, part of what I do is just, throughout the course of a year is helping, high performance, high powered people, get more out of the people inside their organization, because nothing gets done without people, man.
It's really interesting that you bring up the millions that's spent on training and trying to train people to evolve and to be better at their job. Specifically, I'm thinking about, I was doing a presentation in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and I really wanted to say, listen, if you want to stop training people every morning at 8:30 in the morning how to be nice, then just hire high Bs or hire very social, acclimated people. It's already in their DNA. They're already built to be that way. And I don't know if that's true, but it brings me into a good question for you. And that's, we don't have time to get into the weeds today of every position inside the dealership. But what I thought we could do is just hand pick a few out that contrast a little bit and get your insight on on what it can be to hire the right people. So let's start with the sales professional. What are some of the things that you look that a dealer today could do an interview for? What are a couple of key things, obviously if they're not using your system, but what are a few key things that they can look for in a sales professional to make sure they're not hiring a very bad mistake? Because sometimes we know that bad mistakes can be very, very expensive.
Yeah, so a couple of things. When I think about that position and what it takes to do that, people that interview or dealers that are trying to bring on sales folks, they make a very critical mistake. They think because you're a smooth talker that you're going to be a closer. And that's just not the case. You got to have enough fight in you. You got to have enough competitive spirit in you. You got to have enough risk inside of you, to be able to make the ask, and but you got to have the communication skills. So, part of that process about figuring out if somebody's got that, I'm going to ask them questions like, what's the wildest, craziest, riskiest thing you've ever done? And I'm going to gauge off of that, right? Because the guys that live for the thrill of the close and the gals that, push out 30 or 40 cars a month, there is a competitive fire that burns in their belly. Now, people are coached on how to interview. People are, have resume writing services. So my question, to those folks is, if you don't know how they're hardwired, right? Has anybody ever lied on a resume, right? Yeah, that's probably happened from time to time. And the most sales that you're going to get out of some of the folks that come through your door is going to be the time that they're sitting across from you at a table, right? That's going to be their best day of selling on the lot, right? Is to try to get that job, try to get that bonus, try to get that big draw, and then the dealer's hung out over the barrel because you're waiting for that guy to produce, right? And that's a risky situation. So most of the time, even though I use a behavioral instrument in 6 or 7 minutes to figure out who that person is, and I don't care if you use mine, but use something, right? Something with some accuracy to it. But if you don't, all of these things are right in front of you. If you're conscious and you're tuned in and you're paying attention to the person, right, those answers are in front of you. So don't just sit at a table. That good salesperson should walk fast, talk fast, and move fast, and their brain's going to function quickly. So, I'm going to ask them and drill down, how much success, if they're going to tell you that they did this and they did that, well, drill down and find out what part they really played in that. How if they were a general sales manager at a dealership or a new car sales manager, find out what they specifically did to make that, those financial metrics occur, right? Dig down deep and get those answers. And the great thing is that the really great salespeople, the great sales leaders, they're going to be vague, right? But you got to get enough information. But don't spend all that time stuck in an office. Get up, move around the dealership, move around the lot, see if they keep up with you, see if they walk faster than you, see if they talk faster than you, right? Those are all key indicators, along with some risk taker gambler, see if they'll bet you on something on the lot, right? If they got some competitive spirit and some fire and some arrogance about them, they're probably going to be a closer. And that information's right in front of you if you tune in and watch for it.
Yeah, and even at the sales professional level too, in my experience, and I know you and I have worked together for years, and so I've seen what the great things that these tools can do. But what I've learned too is in that interview with that sales professional, that should be a pretty easy conversation. It shouldn't be because they should naturally be social. And I think if you're sitting in an interview and you're wondering if this person is social or not, that could be a big red flag. Would you agree?
Absolutely. In a sales type position, if I get a naturally introverted type of a person, and it really depends on the type of dealership that you run. So let's say you run a wholesale based operation and you're really pushing paper and you're pushing, quantity over, gross, right? Those are order processor type salespeople. Those are customer service type salespeople. So it really depends on what type of dealership that you're actually running. But in a traditional, a deal's a deal type of a organization where people come in because of your inventory and because they've got a relationship built in the community, those people should be fluid and they should be charismatic and they should be storytellers and they should be the folks that paint pictures with words and get you fired up and get you excited. So, if you have somebody that comes across for a sales position and they're socially awkward, but they're pretty well put together, and they're clean and they're tidy and all that stuff. You look at that person, you say, gosh, they should, they bring a nice appearance to the table. They could really represent my dealership. And that may be true, except for people are never going to be easy for them. And so it takes that person a long time to build their book of business, right? And the question becomes is whether the dealer principal or the dealer owner has enough time to wait 7, 8, 9 years for that person to build a book of business that gets them to, 20 cars a month. And that's the challenge. But just because you have somebody like that doesn't mean there's not a place in your organization for them, right? So if I have somebody that's socially awkward like that, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I think maybe sales isn't the best position for you, but I do think you can be successful in another part of our organization. Talk to me about, your office or business running experience or service experience or, some sort of a customer service type role, put them in a BDC type of role. People assume that a really social person belongs in the BDC. That's not necessarily accurate.
Well, that brings us to, move over and transition to another area of the dealership that I don't think is talked about and exploited very much. And you mentioned it, and that's the office. When you're looking for, contrasting the sales professional interview with somebody that's going to work in the back office, maybe doing title work or running the cash drawer, or maybe doing some AR, AP support. What is that support admin role? What characteristics are you looking for in their behavior and personality that would be different, for example, than the sales professional?
Right. So what I typically advise my clients on is to picture taking their best, most socially forward, and typically they're like this too. If you're a socially forward individual, but take their best salesperson that is a flat out people person, put them in an office with no windows and sit them down there and have them crunch through 10,000 line items in a spreadsheet, crunching data, and ask them to do it, indefinitely for the next 10 years, and ask them how long they could actually see themselves doing that job. Most of them will tell you about 4 hours, maybe a day, right? So before essentially their brain just explodes and they can't take it. And so you take a socially forward person like that and put them in a role that requires, a lot of patience, a lot of consistency, but also a lot of detail orientation. My question to, putting somebody in the office, is compliance an issue? Is I dot and T crossing? Is accuracy important? Do you want somebody managing the pennies, or do you want somebody managing the dollars? Because if you got somebody in there that has low detail orientation and they're managing the dollars, you're going to have leakage. You're going to fire that person down the road 6 months, a year at some point when stuff's not adding up, and you're going to go clean out their desk and you're going to find a whole bunch of stuff that fell through the cracks. So when you need accuracy in your reporting and you're running that thing by a P&L and a balance sheet, and you're off on your boat and doing the things on the your extracurricular activities because you think you got the stuff up and running, and you got somebody in an office not taking care of titles properly and AP and AR, how much damage can one person do when they don't have the detail orientation? How much does that cost, a dealer to have somebody, mess up on a, not getting the proper signatures on, some legally binding documents, right? So it's terribly critical. So those people that you're putting in the back of the house, you got to think about the extreme opposite, right, of what you actually need on your sales floor. Those got to be detail-oriented, micro manager, micro thinking, type of individuals. They're not big picture folks, right? They're concerned with tasks and making sure things are done accurately. And you can vet that out in the interview process. If they're, you can go, typically those folks, their households are tidy. When you pull a background check on them and you look at their credit report, their house is in order. There's no outstanding red flags, right? That's a pretty typical characteristic of what in my business we would call a high D type personality, somebody that needs a lot of compliance and a lot of rules and regulations to guide their compass through the day. If they don't have those rules to operate, it's like skydiving, man. So they get really nervous about that. But when you put them in a role that has some boundaries in it, they function very, very well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the mistakes, and I can say this from my own experience, that when you're interviewing multiple candidates for a back office job, you look at what they've done in the past, and I think that's your biggest measuring stick of whether they're going to be good or not. Because we don't really give them any type of detailed test, or we don't test them, which maybe we should, but we don't get any practical examples of how detail orientated they are, and that's something that I know your tools and others can certainly flush out pretty quickly. But let's look at, in the little time we have left, let's look at one other area of the dealership, and I think it's definitely not looked at very much or talked about very much. Seems like we talk about the front end of the house a lot. How to hire salespeople, how to increase gross and volume on the car sale. But the back of the house in the service center, in the service center and your fixed ops, that's a critical area too. And I think more and more dealers, from what I'm hearing, are struggling to find talented techs and then to retain them. So what's the contrast? What's the difference when you're looking for a technician from your perspective?
Well, it is a challenge. Today's generation of upcoming talent, what am I going to try to say here? To a certain degree, it's a lost or a disrespected trade. And, whether it's a plumber or an electrician or, a service tech, those vocationally trained, very specific type roles that require a lot of education. From a recruiting standpoint, the first thing I teach my clients is to think like, collegiate professional sports teams. And I ask them this question is, when do you ever stop recruiting? And when do those organizations ever stop recruiting? And what's the answer to that, Justin?
Never.
Never, ever. And so, when you start needing those vocational stuff, it's not just throwing out a career posting on, Career Builder or Monster or Indeed and hoping you get some. You're going to get some traffic like that, but you got to take it. You got to take that stuff to another level. And a great, fixed ops director or service manager in a small dealerships, they're going to have the community ties and to be watching that talent come through. But at the same time, you can pull that talent from other places because people don't quit. People don't quit companies; they quit people. Right? So you get service techs across town that has some, lack of a better term, some jackass fixed ops director or, service manager that, doesn't treat them with respect. That's really important to a great service tech. Great service tech's never going to interview properly, interview well, right? They're concerned with fixing things and not talking, the really great ones are problem solvers and not concerned with, having small talk, chitty chat conversations. They want to punch the clock and make their money, do their job, and make sure something doesn't come back for a callback or a warranty, right? So, finding those people, you gotta be involved and active in the community. What's the community colleges got going on in that regard? Body shop technicians, right? There's programs for that stuff. You got to help build that up. You can go bring it in from other places. You're just going to pay. So you kind of think about it like baseball, right? Major League Baseball, has a big farm system. What's your farm system look like? What's going to happen when one guy leaves? Are you prepared for it? Are you ready? Can you fill that gap? And those back of house tech guys are kind of like your office staff, right? You don't need them chit chatting, talking, and yickety yakking. You need them working and fixing cars and enjoying what they're doing, studying, researching. Figuring out what's coming down the pipe in regards to, technology and being prepared for the next line of vehicles that are coming through the shop. And so the worst thing you can do in that particular case is take some sort of, fast talking guy and put him back there in the service department. That's a misplaced hire. So, when we sort people, what I'm looking for is who that person is, not what they've necessarily accomplished. There's a career path for anybody that's a socially reserved individual with high detail orientation and has some problem solving capability. They may start as a lube tech without any experience. I may invest in that person because when you're talking about what's important to those people. It's not money typically. They got to have their general needs met, but it's knowledge. So I can pay, I can continue to invest in that individual. They may come in as a lube, as a porter, become a lube tech, move to the parts room, learn that side of the business, then, have enough money to buy some tools, get some training from, whatever place they're going to get training from that you send them to. And before long, they end up, after 3 to 5 years, they're one of your best techs for the next decade. Seen it time and time and time again. But, we go through life and we don't pay attention. We don't look at what those guys are doing. I've watched some dealers spend more time understanding deer and how to go, kill one with a bow than they do their own people in their shop, right? And when that happens, money just bleeds out of that fixed ops department, because that's a huge cash register for dealerships that, either they don't understand or they overlook. So if I'm looking for talent, I'm looking for high detail orientated, socially reserved people that have a little drive and like to just problem solve.
Well, that's good stuff, and I know I could talk to you about this topic forever, and I know we've talked about it a lot in the past, but that's all the time we have, Adam, and I can't thank you enough for offering your expertise and participating in offering it to our listeners. And now you told me you're going to give away a free personality survey with a 15-minute consultation with you personally to any one of the listeners or followers who mentions this particular broadcast. So tell us how that works. How do people get a hold of you? What can they expect out of that?
Yeah, you bet. Typically, what I'm going to do is, any dealer owner that wants to have an assessment of their people, I'm going to do that entirely free of charge.
The whole staff?
The whole staff.
Oh, wow.
I'll give you complimentary access to our software. We're going to have a brief email dialogue, and you can give me a call as well if you like. But we're going to pull some data on your team, and we're going to analyze in about 30, 45 minutes, where some misfit talent might be in your organization. I'm probably going to divide them up into 2 piles and tell you, which ones are going to be your A players and which ones probably need a hand up. And, regardless of whether or not, there's a future for our organizations together, I'm going to leave you with 5 or 10 insights about your people that's going to make your organization stronger. So it simply boils down to sending me an email at awalker@cindexinc.com. You can reach me directly like that, and just tell me that you'd like to request a free demo, and I'll be in touch with you, and we'll set that up in less than 24 hours, and we'll start looking at your team and your players and have a brief discussion about that. You can also go to our website for Culture Index. That is cindexinc.com. And there's a button on there that says click for a free demo. Go there, click that, tell them that you'd like to talk to Adam Walker, and I'll be in touch.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Adam, and thank all of you for listening. And be sure to like and share and subscribe. If you like this episode, send it to someone that you know. Send it to someone, and it doesn't have to be a car dealer. I know Adam does a lot of work with many industries and is responsible for hiring and building very successful superstar type teams. So until next time, I'm Justin Osburn. This has been Tomorrow's Car Dealer, and have a great day. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Justin.